Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to House of Footy. It's your boy Ray, and tonight I've got Mac with me. Welcome, Mac.
Good evening.
Tonight we're going to be going over the action from the FA Cup semifinals. We'll discuss the relegation battle, and we'll also preview some upcoming matches taking place this week. Before we get into it, don't forget to follow us on our social media, both on X and Instagram. Our handle is at @houseof_footy. Also, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to us. We are on both Spotify and YouTube. And lastly, feel free to get in touch with us via email. We love hearing from you guys, and we want you guys getting involved. Our email is houseoffooty@hotmail.com. All right, Mac, let's go straight into the semifinals action from the FA Cup. Two matches that took place, but of course we have to go with the match that had all the drama and all the goals, I would say. Coventry 3, Manchester United 3. Man U, of course, going through on pens. This match was interesting because we kind of predicted that Man U would get chances and score, but we also had a doubt about them in being able to sort of contain Coventry in certain periods of that game, and definitely showed out to be a very entertaining match for the neutrals, to say the least. But what were your overall takes from this game?
I want to... Obviously, we want to be able to get on to talking about Manchester United because us generally cover the Premier League. We've definitely had our highs, not as frequently more recently, and lows much more frequently, and from a Manchester United fan's perspective, in terms of recent coverage on what's been going on most recently with the team. I do want to be able to pour one out here for Coventry because I thought overall, in terms of what they brought to this game, was phenomenal. For being, at the time of recording, 8th in the championship, to pull up performance against a higher... let's be frank here, team in the Premier League, in a similar situation, I think, of the last, I think it's like 10 to 14 meetings between a championship versus a Premier League team. The Premier League team has gone through in the semi-final matchup. So this has always been kind of a fraught situation for a lot of championship teams. And it's just a credit to them how far they made it into competition, especially considering in the manner they came out, because initially they did not start off great. And then you would notice their manager make adjustments, make changes, and that's when you saw them really get back into it. So what Mark Robbins did to bring Coventry back into it was phenomenal. And I do want to be able to kind of specifically pour one out for Ben Sheaf, who's the captain for Coventry, who missed the penalty towards the end of the game. So I want to start with that and make sure that's set. With that being said, Manchester United, I don't think, and I was racking my brain in history, you win a penalty shootout and you're the more depressed team. Not a single situation from, he's like, normally you're happy, right? And you're joyous. And normally you see one of two things happen. It's either, the goalkeeper makes the last save, the whole team goes to jump on the goalkeeper. Or the last score, everyone goes kind of jumps on him, which for me, I always felt like disrespectful, especially the goalkeeper made saves. The guy did one job. What are you doing here? Like, why does he get all the credit? But no, Højlund's the only one that celebrates. The rest of the Manchester United fans just kind of be like, you know what? That's great. Go shake the Coventry City players, and just kind of exit stage right. So again, for me, that I think kind of summarizes the whole atmosphere of the game. They shouldn't have been in that position. They shot themselves in the foot. Coventry did a great job, but I don't know if you could get a lower of a feeling as a team exiting a game that you won in a cup competition in such dramatic fashion. Again, we'll kind of be able to go through the ins and outs, maybe some individual moments, but what are your overarching thoughts from this game?
Yeah, honestly, I was quite surprised that Man U went into the lead and looked comfortable for at least the very first half. I think Coventry had a chance here or there, but really it was Man U's to impose themselves, know that they're the Premier League team. First goal, I think it was Scott McTominay, nice little play down the right hand side, and finished off by McTominay. Of course, that's what you'd expect. That's how Premier League teams should operate in these types of games. Show your experience. Harry Maguire as well from, I think, a set piece. Really, that's what you're supposed to do. You're the superior team, and from that point on, if you play the way Man U have been playing, and then of course they went on to get a third one in the 58-minute mark through Bruno Fernandes, you should just see out the game. Whether it's you defend deep, and allow the other team to possess the ball and make mistakes, and you hit them on a counter, which Man U have done well, or you dominate the possession in key areas away from your goal to prevent any chances, which Man U, of course, weren't able to do. And we kind of touched on that in our preview podcast, discussing what will happen when Man U do have those instances where Coventry are going to get their waves of attacks. And really, even with bodies at the back, had you right, getting that penalty right at the end of the regular time really showed, this is how much pressure they were under. And even though they did make some changes here and there, they weren't able to keep that Coventry team out, which credit to them, like you said, have played well thus far and up to this part of the season in the FA Cup. Gotta feel unlucky for them, especially because what happened in the extra time period. Which, did you want to talk about a little bit about that, or anything covered during the regular 90-minute period, Mac?
It was just kind of a capitulation where you just saw a team that had some adversity and wasn't able to respond to it and kind of gave up on themselves. Individually, you kind of can see the first large chunk of the game where Manchester United were in control, but I would argue they weren't dominant. But they did take their chances, which has been, of course, a misstep from this team historically. But given how you're up to the 70th minute, you're up 3-0, and it kind of falls out underneath you, it's really where that once that first screw is done in, they kind of sit back. They allowed the Coventry to be able to kind of control the game. They allowed Coventry to be able to kind of take it to them. And then from that point on, and I would argue almost all of through extra time as well, dominate the game, and we're in control of the game. And if there's anyone going to win it at that point, it would have been them. They hit the post, they scored a goal that was slightly offside. Again, it was just fine margins that Manchester United even got through to make penalties, which if you would ask any Manchester United fan, is there a way that, in this situation, you would have kind of gone out happy, or in this way? If Coventry initially scored early, Manchester United clawed back, managed to tie it up, and you went to penalties and you won that way, great. But the manner that they did it with this result, it was absolutely poor. And one of the things that kind of stuck out to me is that, and maybe I don't know if we want to talk about Ten Hag or about the individual team, but just compare and contrast Ten Hag's response to this game to what, and again, it's unfortunate he's no longer a manager, but Sir Alex Ferguson in a similar type of position when his team didn't play well in a cup competition. He's like, yeah, we were horrible, we were a disgrace to football, and luck was on our side. Ten Hag came out to say, you know what, we played well, we controlled some aspects of the game. There wasn't really that sense of accountability, right? Where just the realization is where this game, you were so fortunate to get through. And they're extremely fortunate, because imagine if they lost this game. They right now are going to be in a position where everyone's going to throw egg on their face for the next 4 or 5 days to the next round of Premier League games, which we'll talk about later. And then all be forgotten about. And then once we reach towards May, they get the opportunity to play in the final. If they win it, this is all forgotten. But it was just by the finest of margins, because otherwise, again, I think, and even Harry Maguire said in an interview after the game, is like, oh, what about where you kind of it was kind of a fluff question. It was like, what are your thoughts in terms of the fan support rallying behind you? He's like, yeah, I don't know if we won that game, if I would have been allowed to get back on the bus. And I don't think just goes for him. I think that's for a lot of the players on the team and the management staff. So lucky for them. Extremely fortunate. I don't know how else you can kind of describe it that way, that you play so horribly, but you still manage to get through. But again, what about you? Is there any other individual moment that you want to kind of describe or kind of go over or kind of really chat about?
Yeah, and really 2 points to the game after the 90-minute mark. Definitely Coventry City with goal disallowed, and the chance that you pointed out, the one that hits the post. I think if you looking back at the highlight, Onana actually gets a hand on that, which was an amazing reaction save, deflection, however you want to put it. Still comes down to those margins. At that point, yes, definitely Coventry, the team that looked more likely to get a winner in extra time. But after it goes to penalties, you kind of just favor Man U, just the quality of penalty takers that they have, and Coventry, no disrespect to them, but to get this far and face an opposition in the Premier League like Manchester United, you are always going to favor the other team there. So big shout out to Coventry, but like for Man U, with regards to Ten Hag, it feels like we have a close friend that's a Man U fan. Well, we have a couple of close friends that are Man U fans, and then have one of their other close Man U friends, supporting friends, was just waiting for the capitulation for Man U to just break down. And even though they were 2-0 up, it was just, hey, is this just Ten Hag extending his contract or his time at Man U for another couple of weeks? Or is the sack coming? And of course, when they do concede the equalizer, everything starts going on Ten Hag. And so that in itself, the atmosphere and the sentiment towards Ten Hag just doesn't look good for Man U at this point. So I'm not exactly sure anything we learned, but I mean, yeah, just a couple more weeks until the cup final.
Yeah, so I just want to specifically talk about Erik ten Hag and his role. Again, I am not, maybe it may come across this way, I'm not generally not a proponent of someone should get fired or not, or what type of position that they're in, but I don't know what they will do. If they win the FA Cup, does he stay? Because now he's back-to-back seasons of winning 2 trophies. A lot of the Premier League teams would take that and be happy with that management record, even though you have all the turbulence, you have the ups and downs, back-to-back trophies, a League Cup, then FA Cup. That's not a horrible return on your first 2 seasons, right? Where, and that kind of scares me. If I'm a Manchester United fan, I would kind of, even though, yes, you would want to make the final, yes, you want to win trophies, that's what it's all about. If you lost this game, you know he's for sure gone, and now you can kind of be able to reset your culture and move on from there. And I was looking over and just thinking about, okay, if they were to make any changes, what would they do? Because it seems like every previous managerial decision has been a reaction to the one before, right? Where like Ferguson, after Ferguson, David Moyes going to Louis van Gaal, oh, we need winning. To be able to go to Mourinho, we need a little bit more excitement, a little bit more fluff. You know, every manager they brought in has been a direct reaction. Where right now, I feel like even after this win, the feeling is so negative and depressed. Where you maybe just need someone that's going to bring a little bit of joy. Prefer even bring in a really good top flight manager, at least to make it a little bit more of an attractive job. I don't know. We'll wait and see. Again, they still have all to play for in the final against Man City, of course, the team that we're about to cover. But overall, as generally a big bespoke person of, you know, hating is the way to get through life, I really enjoyed this game. It was a lot of fun. And I still have another way for another opportunity to watch Man U and Manchester United capitulate, as you said, in the final against the rivals.
Yeah, I mean, one of the quotes that came out this weekend, Jose Mourinho, of course, talking about Man U, there are still a couple of players still at Manchester United that I didn't want 5 or 6 years ago. So the fact that that's still the case, maybe we look back on Jose Mourinho's time at Man U and think, hey, maybe that's actually the best he could have done. So we'll definitely see what happens there. But of course, they're going to be facing Manchester City, as you alluded to, because Man City won against Chelsea 1-0. Though it wasn't a convincing win, I would say. Definitely Chelsea should have at least gotten on the score sheet. But, you know, there's problems at Chelsea as well. This is a new-looking team. Maybe it was just a step too far for them. Sucks that for Chelsea, who have been on a decent run of form, they weren't able to get the result and even get on the score sheet after multiple chances here. But Man City just broke them down, found their moment, and Bernardo Silva, of course, the player who missed one of those penalties against Real Madrid, makes himself the hero, and Man City are through to the finals again. Mac, what were your overall reactions from this result?
I think you kind of nailed it on right there, where this was much more of an even game, and Chelsea have been playing much better more recently, and it's been definitely consistent to the trend of where they have played to the level of the competition, where they did create some opportunities. They did create some moments in the final third. They just didn't have the shooting boots on, particularly Jackson. Cole Palmer had a nice strike that was saved well by Ortega. But conversely, on the other side, there was no Haaland for Manchester City, which was a miss. I don't know if it was injury or illness, escapes out of the top of my head, but it seemed like they were lacking that little bit more of a driving force. Julian Alvarez played in, and it was very much a rotation of all the front four, really, between KDB, Bernardo Silva, Foden, Jack Grealish, and just kind of be able to find some space and working it between themselves to eventually create something. They created a couple of opportunities themselves. So overall, I think you're spot on with it being a fair game. City just had probably that slight better edge of chance, the slight better one or two more extra opportunities, which led to their goal. So not too much of sparse, as well as I think And as soon as we said this, at least I've said this a couple times, specifically in the FA Cup, looking back, it seems like Chelsea are finally getting themselves on a roll and going back to the team that they should have been. And it'll be very exciting to see what impact it'll have now that they're kind of the FA Cup run is over, what they can do in the Premier League to see if they can kind of continue to vault themselves up in the Premier League race. What about you? Any other thoughts or what are your other takeaways from this game?
I mean, Chelsea fans, you must be, for all those Chelsea fans who were laughing at Darwin Núñez last season, it's come around, of course, because, of course, Nicholas Jackson missed quite a few chances this game. It's great that he's getting into those positions because, as Darwin Núñez was last season for Liverpool, the same thing could be said about him, but it just looks like the lack of confidence, lack of consistent goal scoring has caught up with him. He has the one-on-one chance where he tries to take it around Ortega. At that point, you just have to make the quick decision and take a chance there. Of course, him kind of go around Ortega and not really sorting his feet out makes it tough for him. So, okay, that's fine, you can say. But the double chance that he gets where he's through again, shot is unconvincing. And then the cross from Cole Palmer, he's not really able to get any conviction on the finish. Just shows to me they're lacking that final threat, and if it's not going to come from Cole Palmer, who had that chance, and Ortega made a nice save, it's not going to. It looks unlikely it's going to come from anyone else from that team at this point. One other thing that I did want to point out is, of course, there was a handball shout for Chelsea. I think it was off a free kick. Cole Palmer hits it off of Jack Grealish's hand or arm. Definitely could have gone Chelsea's way, and of course would have been fantastic to see what Cole Palmer would have done in that situation, because we all know that he's going to be the one taking it. But ultimately,
wait, when you say we all know, does Jackson know? Are you sure the Chelsea? I don't know. I don't know that they know. I know, but sorry, go ahead.
That's fair. No, maybe Jackson would have taken that and missed that. That would have been, of course, really bad for him. But we would have expected, of course, Cole Palmer to put that away. But instead, Man City, the way they win is they just, of course, get through those chances. Kyle Walker does a great job playing that sort of last gasp defending to sort of put off the strikers who are through. And then on the other side, they're just able to break down teams by possession. And even though Grealish had to come off for Doku, who has been a great impact sub over the last couple of weeks, he's the one who finds KDB making that run, and then Bernardo Silva at the far post. So kind of done and settled with how City eventually will get the win. I think as well, though, Jack Grealish has been a lot more impressive these last couple of weeks. So that's another big shout for him. How he finished this season to make that England squad, and of course make that starting England squad if he does step up. So that's the only thing that I would say really I learned from this game. For Chelsea, though, Mac, I'm not sure. Maybe it's just, I mean, they didn't play horrible. On any other given day, it could have been 2-3 up. But yeah, I guess it just sucks that they've lost at a semi-final point this time around, and then, of course, lost in the final of the FA Cup to Liverpool. So we'll see how they finish the season to really judge them. What do you think?
I think if they gone on wins the FA Cup, that would have been great for them. But for me, it's more so about their process in terms of making sure that their consistency there, the outputs there, the competitive levels are there, which they've kind of gone up and down through the course of this entire season, and that's reflected in the results, where this, I would argue, has been their best stretch of the season, as well as towards the end of last year. And then there's been highs and lows throughout that. So this at least is a sample of, yeah, you didn't win the game, but the consistent level was there in terms of their approach, in terms of they had a tactical game plan. They were able to get on the ball. They created some opportunities against a quality team. Were able to mitigate one of the best offenses in the world, if not the best attack in the world, even though they're missing their star striker, to very few chances themselves. So on edge, if you take an kind of that odds-on opportunity and you win, I think from this game, if you play it out 10 times, Chelsea maybe win 3-4 of those, and I think that's a credit to them. The interesting part would be do those levels sustain? Because that's been the issue. If they sustain for the rest of the year, they're going to climb up and be in a Europa League spot, which if you asked any Chelsea fan, like I said, towards the beginning of last year, they would have happily taken that, because at that point they were looking at how far down the table do we drop? Do we drop 12th, 13th? Now they're getting closer to in and around that top 8 situation. So if those levels stay the same, we'll have to wait and see. We'll talk about later in today's podcast the next matchup in the Premier League. But again, that's why it's tough for me. I don't want to ridicule them, but I don't want to take too much away because they've been so inconsistent. I don't know how to directly assess what I think they'll do because it's anyone know. Anyone could know. I even someone that has a crystal ball would still be left guessing.
Exactly. Just quickly before we wrap up this part is I think there definitely was a drop off for Man City, but I don't think that's much to do with sort of their system or style. Definitely has to do with playing 120 minutes at in the midweek against the Real Madrid, and of course the legs catching up to them. So I do expect them to have a fully strengthened team for the rest of the season, and definitely favorites to win both the Premier League and the FA Cup from this point. So let's take a quick break here, Mac. We'll come back, talk about the relegation battle, and then also some of the upcoming games taking place this week. So stay with us, guys. Welcome back to Hustle Footy, guys. We are going to continue our podcast now, discussing the relegation battle. Of course, this past weekend, we saw a lot of the teams down there at the bottom facing each other, and it's fair to say now, or at least I'll kick us off by making a statement. Everton are likely safe this time around. That win against Nottingham Forest, which a lot of talking points from that result, pretty much guarantees that they're going to be safe. 30 points currently on 16th placed. The next team, of course, Nottingham Forest, who they just beat on 26 points, having played a game more as well. 2 long-range efforts really put the game away for Everton, though there were, of course, some talking points that we can talk about. But from this result, Mac, or any other results from the last from the relegation battle games, anything stood out to you?
For me, again, I know it's going back to him, and maybe it's selfish. I think Burnley have given themselves a chance based off of their win against Sheffield United. Because, again, going in, I think even though Everton, it's really only 4 points out, because then it all can change if Nottingham Forest win their next game, then they're still 1 point out. But they have that extra game in hand, and they've been playing well enough that you should see them through for the Premier, at least to stay up. Did they finish 17th? Maybe, but they should be comfortable in staying up, in my opinion, given what we've seen of them. But as they've kind of pushed themselves away, Burnley with their win against Sheffield United, which I think on the balance of play really comes down to a goalkeeping performance. If you kind of take a look at those chances that Sheffield United had, they should have won the game, I would argue. I think it's Murchich has come in to be able to start for Burnley instead of Travers, who was Trafford, my apologies, the English goalkeeper. He had a game of a game. He had several huge saves to keep Burnley in it, keep it level. Burnley then score their opportunities off of, I would argue, poor goalkeeping on Sheffield United's end. Grbic should have made a couple of saves, but he didn't. And that was the separator where even though Sheffield United tried to get back into the game, did end up scoring, couldn't really get themselves through. And that further just kind of lays another layer of cement on top of their case of why they're being relegated. But from that result, Burnley now they have tough games coming up. They face Newcastle, Manchester United, and Tottenham in consecutive weeks. So that's a murderer's row right now of what you don't want to see in your schedule, in your fixture list. I guess maybe Manchester United, who knows? We'll see about that. But they at least have an opportunity because they're only 2 points back from Un and 3 points back from Nottingham Forest. So even though they're definitely going to lose in terms of goal difference for both those teams respectively, if those other two teams don't see themselves out, Burnley may be even being in a position on the last day of the season facing Nottingham Forest to have their destiny in their own hands. So very excited for them to see what happens. Definitely wanted to see them going into season stay up, and I would like to see that still, of course, occur. But they've given themselves a fighting chance with the results that both Nottingham Forest and Luton had. What about you? What was any other takeaways from the round of, I guess, relegation battles from this past weekend? Yeah,
so on that point about Burnley against Sheffield, it's done for them. I did like the way Burnley were able to just take advantage of how poor Sheffield were defensively and have been all season. The first 2 goals, were scored by, sorry, I just had it here, Bruno Larson and Assignon. Sheffield looked like a Sunday League team defending, and it just, if you're going to set up that way and defend that poorly, you're never giving yourself a chance to really stay up. The only positive I would say is Gustavo Hammer, who Sheffield signed the season. For him personally, he's gonna likely stay in the Premier League. I'm sure another team can pick him up from Sheffield. Unfortunately for them, though, they probably won't see him in the Championship next season. He was able to get one back, but then of course the amount of space that Lyle Foster finds himself in for the third goal, and then of course Goodmanson just finishes the game at the 71-minute mark. Just sets us. Sort of dictates what we already knew. Sheffield just poor defensively, and Burnley, if they can continue scoring that way, who knows? They could pull up a result here and there. So we'll see what happens. I think it's very important, though, that Luton didn't get a result this weekend against Brentford, and this was the game I think that they needed to win. Though they also were on the end of a big spanking from Brentford. Ultimately, Wisa, Pinnock, Lewis Potter, and Sade were the ones that were able to get on the score sheet. And by the time Barry gets the consolation for Luton, they're just beaten and just depressed by the end of the game. And Brentford looked good, even without Ivan Toney, who I think was just missing due to just accumulation of games. And he, I think, was dealing with some injury concerns. But yeah, scoring 5 against a team that was as downbeaten as Luton will only be good for their confidence and look for themselves as well. They're going to be further away from the relegation battle. So it really is up to Luton and really up to Nottingham Forest now to see if Burnley can catch them. Anything on Nottingham Forest this past week, Mac?
No, they gave nothing. I think Gary Neville came out afterwards and said, based off the result and just the levels of performance, because it felt like even though the game was somewhat close in scoreline, they didn't bring any really attacking threat. They didn't really kind of provide anything that you'd want to see to the certain point where, to be honest, with that level of performance in the situation that you are in, need to come out and win to at least put yourself, or at least a draw, to put yourself in a position where, okay, yeah, we have relegation breathing down our necks, but let's give ourselves a little wiggle room. And they didn't. And it was almost a fireable offense from the manager. And that's what at least Gary Neville said. Don't necessarily have that strong of a take on them individually. Right. I think, though, again, they should be the favorites. Looking at their run-in, they should be a little bit more comfortable in terms of the teams they're facing. I do want to, because they still have to face Sheffield United, which should be a win. Fingers crossed. Maybe Sheffield United helps out their former championship teams that had come up with them. So at least, even though they do have to face still Manchester City as well as Chelsea, they should feel comfortable in staying. Despite if they get those 3 points, that should be almost enough. If anything, against Burnley at the last day of the season, again, we'll have to wait and see what happens there. But just considering you come out with Everton and you lay a big old goose egg, where Jordan Pickford, I really never felt like he was too troubled. He wasn't working too hard. Very poor on them. Did you have any thoughts about them individually? Before I do want to be able to just make a couple of points on the Luton-Brentford game. Any thoughts on that game?
Just quickly, Nottingham Forest felt definitely that they should have had a couple of penalties gone their way. Big shouts on even their social media saying there were 3 extremely poor decisions, 3 penalties not given, which we simply cannot accept. We warned PGMOL that the VAR is a Luton fan for the game, and they didn't change them. Our patience has been tested multiple times. So, of course, very strong words from Nottingham Forest, but at this point, the only chance that really they had, I think, was the Morgan Gibbs-White chance that went wide, and then, of course, the Callum Hudson-Odoi shot that really Pickford had no trouble dealing with. You're going to put yourself in that situation, then these next couple games are going to be huge for them. That's about it. What about Brentford, Mac?
Sorry, just want to talk about the difference in front 3, the capabilities there is what's kept Brentford up. Having a solid defense, be able to build up them from the back, at least have a sound structure. Because in that game against Luton, it's not as if Brentford outpossessed them and control and dominated the game. No, what they were is they were strong, they were physical. They won their one-on-one battles. They made simple, sound decisions, which Luton have had a tendency thus far this season to kind of shoot themselves in the foot. And then when they're able to put it into the front 3 of Mbomo, Wisa, Lewis Potter, who all played exceptionally well, you could feel confident in their ability. Okay, we can take our man. We'll be able to create something for ourselves or even our teammates, and they end up doing just enough for that. Whereas conversely, for Luton, they don't have anything around that. I would argue, other than the Sambi Lokonga, Ross Barkley midfield, they don't have much going for them, at least from a attacking sense, where those, I would argue, are their best players there, because Chong, Clark, Morris, for them, not good enough. And defensively, they're not sound enough either. So it's really, you got to hang your hat one way, at least to be able to give yourself a platform to stay in the Premier League. Be amazing at one thing, figure that out, and then that should give you at least opportunity to stay up. And they haven't figured it out either way, where they seem to be below average in every aspect, and that's what consistently, it's not as if they get hammered every week, but they consistently just don't have enough, because they're not good enough in any one individual aspect. So pour on them to lay a goose egg like that again, similar to Nottingham Forest, and again, kind of breeze life back into Burnley season potentially. So all to play for these next couple of games. Very excited to see what happens.
Yep, and speaking of breathing life into teams, we're going to preview now some upcoming Premier League fixtures, and Arsenal have a new sense of hope that they basically got from the win this past weekend against Wolves. Of course, now they're first place with a game, and having played a game more than Man City, and really that's what you needed from Arsenal to come back and get a decent win away from home at a game at a ground that is never going to be easy to win at, against Wolves, of course. Goals on each end of the both halves from Trossard and Odegaard really put the game away for Arsenal, and they looked comfortable for this game. But of course, they faced Chelsea, who tied them at Stamford Bridge 2-2 earlier this season. Chelsea are going to, of course, try to bounce back as well from the FA Cup disappointment. What are your predictions for this upcoming game, Mac?
I never thought I would say this towards the end of the season. The reports are coming out that Cole Palmer is probably going to miss the game. He's a huge doubt due to injury. And I'm a little thankful. I never thought I'd be like, hey, you know what? I'm a little bit worried about Cole Palmer going into an Arsenal game, eh?
Right.
But no, anything could happen. And that's what very interesting in the game we'll talk about right now. In the next game, Everton versus Liverpool, kind of those collective. It's two derbies. Anything could happen. And Arsenal still have to go to play at the London Stadium versus Tottenham later on. So they still have another one down the road in terms of a derby matchup. So this is something that all these teams, respectively, across the board, need to come out with a strong performance and a win. For Arsenal, you would anticipate they're going to control the game. Let's be frank. They're going to be able to have a whole lot of opportunities in the final third to potentially create chances for themselves. The question would be, is in that midfield battle, does the Odegaard, if it's Declan Rice and Jorginho, does Odegaard and Declan Rice dictate play enough where they're able to find seams to create opportunities for either, if it's a Trossard, Martinelli on the left-hand side, or Bukayo Saka on the right-hand side, to get in behind and kind of poke at this poorish Chelsea defense? I think that they should have had enough, and I think what we had just saw in a performance against Man City from Chelsea, they should feel confident. It's like, hey, we're playing, let's be frank here, the kind of the short-change version, the underside version, the definitely junior version of a Man City team. Copy and paste that template should be enough. But to play those levels during a cup competition where you're playing for last gasp, everything to play for, you can maybe draw that energy out a little bit more versus maybe coming in deflated, playing at the Emirates. If things don't go well for them early on, I could see themselves kind of collapsing. And that's where Arsenal, if they're able to get out, create opportunities early, maybe score a goal within the first 20, 25 minutes, they should cruise to a win. If Chelsea are able to hang on by that point and feel, hey, now we can start to maybe a little bit come out of our shell, a little bit of kind of build up and deny Arsenal pressure, and then it creates more of a pressure on Arsenal for themselves, because they need to come out to win. Opportunities for them. I think that's Chelsea's path forward. And I think that from what we've seen, they should be able to do that. The only downside to them is Cole Palmer's not playing, and you're really relying on a Jackson to score. You haven't had much luck this season. The only other interesting side plot to this is that if Cole Palmer's not playing, what would the structure look like for Chelsea? Do you see Mudryk drop back into the lineup? Do you see Madueke start? I'm very interested to see, because it has been such where he's the first name on the team sheet, and they built around the team to make sure that he's successful because he's been their best player. But when you take that away, do we see someone else to fill that void? Do we see a change in system? So I'm very excited to see how Chelsea line up, who becomes maybe their focal point, or just even the style of play change, considering they're missing arguably their best player. So very excited about this game. What about you?
This is a great shout, because I would have expected them to really keep the same type of formation that's gotten them to where they are. Cole Palmer would be a huge miss for them. So I do expect a player like Mudryk to step into that position, which I think he has had some minutes playing in that position, but it's definitely going to be a different dynamic where Cole Palmer is definitely going to look to link up. I think link up and maybe create play from the middle of the pitch. I think Mudryk will just drift into the middle and then try to run off of Nicholas Jackson, who, if he plays like a target man, a la Olivier Giroud, maybe Mudryk can find some good service in that sense and really just try to run off the back of the Arsenal defenders. But at this point, and like you said, Chelsea will feel like they have been on a bit of an upward tick in form. This is kind of all to play for. I think that's where they are going to run into a problem, though, because Arsenal, I think if they were to have a wobble, they would have had a poor result against Wolves away. At Arsenal, though, at home, I don't see them dropping this game just because now you got the win against Wolves. You do have a still, I would say, a tired squad at this point, but definitely looks like the previous issues last year where they were in a position chasing the league, and it just was the first time for them, and it was overwhelming. This time around, I think Arteta's got them gone to them, saying, "Hey, we narrowly lost to Bayern Munich in that quarterfinal. We still have all to play for. If we give ourselves a chance to win against Chelsea, put pressure on Man City, and who knows what can happen." And so, yeah, I do think Arsenal have a quality, and gotta shout out Arteta because I do think he's going to have his players unfazed by this opposition that Chelsea do bring. And even if they go down 1 or 2 goals down, that's how they came back. They came back and tied it at Stamford Bridge earlier this season. I definitely can't see the same thing happening. So definitely expect Arsenal to get a result here. But again, it really depends on what Chelsea team comes out. On the flip side, for Everton against Liverpool, two teams finding themselves at the opposite ends of the table, a derby. Nonetheless, Liverpool did win the first fixture 2-0 at Anfield. I do see Liverpool winning this game as well against Everton, even though Everton are at home and then just off the back of that win against Nottingham Forest. I think now that Liverpool got that 3-1 win against Fulham, Jota, of course, coming in, and I would say Liverpool looked more fluid with Luis Diaz on the right, Gakpo down the left, and Jota down the middle, where, you expect Salah and Nunez really to be the starters, but their drop in form has given the opportunity to these other players coming in, and they look like they are going to take that opportunity and run with it. So I do expect at least the competition to bring back some type of form in Salah and Nunez if possible, but if not, hey, Gakpo, I think, if I'm not mistaken, at least assisted or got on the score sheet. Jota definitely did. And yeah, I do expect a Liverpool win here. What about you, Mac?
I agree. Liverpool should be heavy favorites. They are heavy favorites. But just like I said in the first matchup, this is a derby where a lot of that stuff you can kind of throw out the window because we don't know the individual emotions that will go into this game, how the fans may react, how the players may react to the fans, and what's going on at Goodison Park right now. Where if Everton are able, let's say if you're an Everton fan and you come out and pull up a win here, and you're not only able to put yourself in position. Yeah, we stayed up because we beat Liverpool, but we also prevented Liverpool from chasing down the title. That's a dream situation for them. And even though Liverpool are going to face well ahead of them in the standings, that's something as an Everton fan you'll take away with you. Probably for the next couple of years, easily, reigning on the Klopp's final season with Liverpool. It's teed up for a magnificent game, and I'm very excited. I think this may potentially be my game of the weekend because of that factor, where even though Arsenal, Chelsea, cool, they're both in London, but are they really the real rivals? No. These two teams, Liverpool and Everton, are real rivals in that manner. Different class of teams, but the competition's always fierce. I would be very, very interested to see if we see in the first inside 20 minutes, Everton score a set piece. How does Liverpool really respond to that? And just like I would argue one of Liverpool's greatest strength, even though it's a little bit underrated, is their ability to be able to score on set pieces themselves through Trent Alexander-Arnold, who's come back in, and just their physical prowess across the whole pitch. So I think that's going to be an interesting battle. And Everton, even though, like I said, Liverpool are very generally good at that, Everton should feel comfortable in the situation. So as long as they're able to kind of control those transitional opportunities, and you're waiting to see if a Szoboszlai or if McAllister can create something out from 30 yards, which they can do. On their day, though, they may not be able to, and that's where Everton may get their joy. So I'm very excited for this matchup, because even though Liverpool should be favorites, are heavy favorites, I think maybe it's just my bias here. I think Everton are in with the fair shout, even more so. Again, maybe it's my bias here, even more so than Chelsea versus Arsenal, because Everton, I feel like, have an easier path of potentially being successful against this Liverpool team, considering their strengths and the Liverpool side's weaknesses.
Yeah, you can definitely see a clear game plan from Everton, and if they execute that to perfection, very much like Crystal Palace did a couple weeks ago, how Atlanta have done as well in recent games against Liverpool, could be a rough day there. But just wanted to finish off this podcast, Matt, because personally, just even if you don't want to talk about it, I want to bring this up. Crystal Palace versus Newcastle taking place this week. And a lot of people might overlook this, but Crystal Palace did beat West Ham 5-2 this past weekend. They were 4-0 up inside the first half against West Ham, who, off the back of the Europa League exit, would have been feeling, down on their luck. But nonetheless, Crystal Palace scoring at will, it looks like, at this point. And Newcastle, who weren't in action this past weekend, I think if I'm not mistaken, they had a huge result against Spurs not too long ago. They won the first game actually 4-0 at home, Newcastle that is. So Crystal Palace is going to want to put that game, put that tie on their side and win this one, and of course try to finish the season strong. So I expect a really good back and forth matchup from this match. Crystal Palace will be looking to get those front three, front four involved with goals, but Newcastle as well, they would have had some rest, which is, I think, much needed for them, and hopefully some time for those injuries to come back. And on the flip side, they of course have been high scorers recently. So could we see a high scoring match here, Mac? What do you expect?
Absolutely. I would not be surprised if this game ends up in a 4-3 or 3-2 situation by full time, because with Glasner coming in for Palace, you see that more emphasis on an attacking threat. Yes, like you said, in terms of being up for nothing early on in the game against West Ham, but still to be able to concede two. Not a great look, but you're still comfortable enough that it's not going to stress you out too much. But Palace, I feel like, are one of the best teams, similar to Everton, but I think at a higher level, of playing the spoiler. They have a template there. You can easily do that, not easily do that, but there is a clear game plan of how to be successful. The problem more recently under our previous manager, Roy Hodgson, is that you didn't see enough of that attacking threat there. Even though they were sometimes solid defensively, if you're not able to score, you're not going to win games. And what Glasner's being able to get out of them is on the front foot a little bit more, creating opportunities for a lot of their players. And you have the Eze rounding into form coming after injury, and hopefully Elise as well too, who's been in and out of the lineup. So if they're able to get there to Big Dogs running like that and creating in the final third, they're one of the better spoiler potential teams in the Premier League, or kind of a banana peel for any of these other teams. Newcastle, though, it's tough for them because they're facing a team, again, as we highlighted, now can get on and score. And Newcastle, they need to win. They want to be able to make sure that they at least, even though they're not going to make Champions League this year, in all likelihood, they want to at least be able to make it the Europa League and finish above a lot of their other competition to set themselves up to be successful next year. So I lean nobody. I'll be honest with you. It is a coin flip in a lot of ways. I know that's cop out, but I would flip a coin. If this is what we call a stay away, ladies and gentlemen. Just don't bet on this game, but watch it because you'll enjoy it. If anything, just put the over on goals and call it a day.
There you go. So definitely a game that we'll be watching, guys. So, and we'll definitely cover it in our next podcast. So that means that we're going to conclude our podcast here for today. If you guys like what you heard, please like and subscribe to us on our social media. That's at @house_of_footy. If you have any comments, suggestions, or general banter, get in touch with us via email as well, houseoffooty@hotmail.com. The next time you hear from us will be Thursday, when we'll be reviewing the games from this weekend. From this week, and we'll also be previewing the games coming up this weekend. But until then, thank you, Mac, for joining us.
Peace out.
See you guys soon.